All right. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Cristina Martinez. I am the Director of Long-Term Recovery and Major Initiatives for Adams County. I am excited to have a few of my colleagues on the call with me. So if we could just take a moment, Glenn and then Kylan, if you could introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Yes, good afternoon. Glenn Robinson, Deputy Director for the Department of Human Services. Welcome.
And I'm Kylan Mueller. I'm a management analyst in the county manager's office, and I'm just going to be working in the background. If anyone has questions, you can input them on the Q&A section there.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us, and for all of our participants for making time to learn more about the Adams County COVID-19 grant program. So just a little bit of logistics before we dive into the presentation. Throughout the presentation, you can submit through the Q&A feature any questions that you may have during the presentation. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll also give folks an opportunity to virtually raise their hand, and then Kylan will allow you to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation as well. So with that, we will dive in. Sorry, I adjusted my setup and now I need to find my, here we go. There we go. All right. So today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the American Rescue Plan Act funding, and then go through little details about the grant program. So who should apply, when to apply, how to apply, what the funding criteria is, as well as a number of priorities that have been identified both by the federal government, the Colorado governor, as well as the Adams County Board of Commissioners. And then, as I mentioned at the end of the presentation, we will have the opportunity for question and answers. So diving right in, Congress approved earlier this year $350 billion through the American Rescue Plan Act for eligible state, local, and tribal governments across the nation. Colorado as a state received $3.8 billion. Separately, Adams County received directly $101 million through ARPA. So we have $50 million in the bank right now. We anticipate our second funding distribution to be made available summer of 2022. So the Board of County Commissioners has made decisions on how to spend the first $50 million, which includes why you were all here today, which is $35 million for external priorities managed through an open competitive grant application process. Additionally, the board has set aside $10 million for internal projects that is to encompass a variety of priorities and needs that we have as an organization, and to be able to serve the residents of Adams County. And then lastly, the board has set aside $5 million for contingency. As we have learned over the last 18 months, COVID continues to challenge us in unexpected ways. And so we wanted to ensure that we had some dollars set aside for any unforeseen changes or needs that may arise because of the pandemic. So getting into the nuts and bolts of who should apply for the COVID grant program, really there's 5 major categories. So businesses of all sizes, non-governmental organizations, nonprofit organizations, school districts, and special districts. And we know that special districts in particular did not receive direct funding allocations the way other arms of government did, such as counties and municipalities and states. So when to apply? Right now, we are in our informational webinar phase of the process. So we started last week hosting these webinars, and then we'll continue through the end of the week. We have another session tomorrow, and then one in Spanish on Friday. This is really an opportunity for us to share high level what the intention of the program is, and make sure that you are all aware of our timelines and the expectations from an application perspective. Starting November 1st is when the actual application will go live and be made available to members of the public. And then the board has authorized a 30-day application period with grants applications due on November 30th. And then we will have an internal review process. And the goal is by early 2022 to have contracts executed with applicants that were successful in the process. So how do folks apply? As I mentioned, the application will go live on November 1st at the website listed on your screen. I do have to state this just in case submission of a grant application is not a guarantee of funding, but we do encourage as many organizations as are interested to submit an application. So how are we going to be scoring these grant applications? There are 4 sets of funding criteria that have been set out by different organizations. So first and foremost, applicants must meet the federal requirements. The governor has identified 4 COVID priorities, and then the county goals, operational organizational goals, there are 5 of those, and then the Board of County Commissioners has also identified 10 specific county COVID-19 priorities, and I will dive a little deeper into the 4 of these in upcoming slides. So starting off with the federal funding criteria, first and foremost, most important thing to remember is that applications need to be in response to a need or negative impact of the COVID-19 public health emergency. And depending on what type of application you're submitting, you need to be able to identify how the program, the service, or other intervention addresses the identified need or impact created by COVID. We know that there's a large number of needs across Adams County, and we would love to be able to prioritize all of those other needs, but really this needs to be focused on impacts and in response to COVID-19. And you will see this emphasized throughout the presentation. So the funding criteria, again, must have endured negative economic or other impact due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. As an organization, we want to make sure that you are in good standing with state and local taxes, any appropriate professional licensing, and any applicable local codes and ordinances that may apply to your organization. We also want you to be in good standing with the Colorado Secretary of State. We're also going to be asking a few financial questions. So one is going to be any other governmental, private, or charitable assistance that you've received to supplant any losses or offset revenue in response to COVID. Additionally, we will be asking as well if you have received funding from Adams County, even if it's not related to the specific grant proposal. So perhaps you received a grant from the Adams County Foundation for a different project. Perhaps you have received a community development block grant. We want to just make sure that we have a full picture of the funding resources that you've received, in particular for the COVID application, and then separately for any other programs and services that you offer as an organization from Adams County. We also made the decision that any national, state, or local elected office holders with business interests will not be eligible for these funds. Continuing our funding criteria, there will be no minimum or maximum application amount. We really want all organizations to be able to come through the process with the need that is most relevant to them. It may be a smaller application, it may be a much larger application, but we did not want to limit the creativity of ideas that are submitted throughout this process. I do want to flag, though, that funds, as you're thinking about your project, your proposal, your interventions, know that we are asking and requiring that funds be spent by December 31st, 2024. So ensure that it's a proposal that can meet that deadline. And then the project or proposal must also only serve Adams County residents. We know we have a number of existing partners that serve multiple counties. We're asking, though, that the application that comes through our process focus only on and only serves Adams County residents. And then once again, to emphasize for a third time, funds requested must be used in response to COVID-19 itself or the harmful consequences of the economic disruptions resulting from or exacerbated by the COVID-19 public health emergency. So when you go to submit your application, you're going to see a table that looks very similar to this. There are 7 different expenditure code categories that the federal government has identified. The first one that you see on your screen is public health, which is probably most of interest to attendees for this particular session. So if you are an organization that is looking to provide vaccinations or testing or contact tracing, you would need to select at least one of those categories, but you can select multiple depending on your project scope of work. Perhaps you're a business that needs additional PPE, you would select 1.5. So we'll walk through all of the different federal expenditure codes, but just know that we will be asking you to select which of these codes your project fits within. The next category is negative economic impacts. As you can see, household assistance, unemployment, job training, direct assistance to small businesses, nonprofits, or other impacted industries is really what the target is of the negative economic impacts. Category 3 are services to disproportionately impacted communities. We have education assistance, healthy childhood environments, housing and support, as well as social determinants of health are encompassed within category 3. The next one is premium pay. Premium pay, if you're interested in this, this is really above and beyond what the normal salary and benefits are for your staff. So we have a number of essential workers within Adams County, in a variety of both in the public and private sector. So if this is something that your organization is interested in applying in, just remember this cannot supplant what you would have normally paid your staff. This has to be above and beyond regular salary and benefits. The next is around infrastructure, clean water, drinking water, as well as broadband. And then number 6 is really more so for the county as an organization, which is revenue replacement. And then number 7, as you can imagine, there is infrastructure that is needed for us to manage these dollars. So there's the opportunity for us to get reimbursement for administrative expenses, as well as evaluation and data analysis. There's a really, really big focus and emphasis in the federal rule, as well as our reporting requirements on evaluation and data analysis regarding the investment of these dollars in our community. Next, we have the governor's COVID-19 priorities. So there are 4 priorities that the governor has identified. There's a couple of different structures through which people are meeting and providing feedback. These groups are going to provide recommendations to the legislature and the governor early 2022 for potential legislative action during the 2022 session. You will not be receive extra points or be deducted points in any way, whether your project fits within these 4 areas or not. It's more so an information gathering point for us to make sure that we are looking for additional opportunities that may become available based on what your project scope is and if they are in alignment with the action that we anticipate the legislature to take in 2022. The next set of criteria are the county's goals, and you will see additional information on each of these categories on our website. This is really kind of the North Star through which the county operates, and so we want to make sure that projects and proposals are supporting the overarching goals of the county as an organization as well. And lastly, our last set of funding priorities. These are Board of County Commissioners COVID-19 grant funding priorities. As you'll see on the screen, there are 10 different categories. You will receive extra points if your project focuses on one of these 10 priority areas. And I do want to emphasize the blue bar that you see at the bottom of your screen that has equity and people first. Really, that is the foundation of the priorities that the board has identified. You may be wondering where and how these 10 priority areas were identified by the board. You may remember, you may have been involved in some work groups that were established in May of 2019 in response to the COVID pandemic. These groups oftentimes were led by county commissioners and other key department staff, and those committees existed through the end of 2019. So based on the work, the conversations that occurred during those 7 work groups over those, I think it was 9 months, the board felt comfortable moving forward and identifying these priorities in addition to ongoing constituent feedback that they've received throughout the pandemic. And as I mentioned, there's going to be a very large focus on equity. We're going to be asking some questions that may be new or different for many organizations. So if you are a nonprofit, for example, we're going to be asking about your board and staff demographics. We really want to understand what your organizational structure looks like. Same thing if it's a business, we want to understand the ownership demographics. And then you can see some of the additional questions that we will be asking that are specifically related to equity. The federal rule is very clear, the way that it's written, that equity is really focused on two different benchmarks. Number one is race and ethnicity. I just want to be very clear, we are talking about communities of color here. And then the other is lower socioeconomic groups. And we know that there is a lot of intersectionality, especially here in Adams County, between those two categories. So we want you to start thinking about how is your work, how is your proposal really going to work to address those historical inequities that were only exacerbated by the impact of the pandemic. So once an application has been submitted, we do our reviews, we make recommendations to the board decides which applicants are going to receive funding, what's going to happen after that point. There's going to be a few items that we're going to ask our successful grantees to meet, and that's going to be monthly financial reporting as well as monthly data reporting. We have an internal team that we've established that is going to be focusing on metrics, and we will work with you as individual organizations to determine what that data reporting needs to look like. The federal government is interested in both outcomes and outputs, and what that means is an output is how many people did you serve? Did you serve 200 kiddos? Did you serve 500 veterans? Are you a business that averages 100 people a day? And then the output, which is really what is the outcome? So based on the services that you provided, what change? What change did you create by providing those services within Adams County? The next is a legal agreement that will outline the financial requirements, data requirements. So we'll ask you to sign an agreement with the county for the funds. There's some auditing language in there as well, and document retention. Next, site visits, and we'll work with you as an organization and a grantee to determine the cadence and when those will occur. And then again, as a reminder, funds must be expended by December 31st, 2024. Throughout my short 3.5 months with the county, developing this program as well as really working to understand the ins and outs of the American Rescue Plan Act, I've found a number of resources helpful to me, and I hope they will be helpful to you. So I've included the links here. The first link that you'll see is the Adams County COVID-19 Response and Recovery webpage. This page was created back in 2019, so hopefully you've taken a look at it. This is where you will see the application. We're working to develop some FAQs based on feedback that we're hearing and questions we're receiving during these webinars. So this will be your go-to. This is also where you'll submit your application. The next is the Treasury. They have a number of resources on their website. The two documents that I found beneficial are the interim final rule, and I do want to flag for those of you that maybe following ARPA really closely and what the Treasury is doing. We know that the final rule has not been published, but Treasury has provided guidance that as long as we're working to the best of our ability to implement based on current guidance, that we have the green light to move ahead with spending and development of programs. So we are comfortable moving forward with the COVID-19 grant program. My go-to though is the compliance and reporting guidance. That's also where you'll see the expenditure codes, that the blue table that we just walked through with the 7 different categories. I highly recommend that you take a look at that document in particular. It also help walk you through what data reporting will be required depending on the expenditure code category that your project fits within. Couple of other resources that the state has available. The first is the Department of Local Affairs COVID recovery funding sources. They have a number of, there's a table in there that will be a good resource. It may be funding that's complementary to the project or idea you have, or perhaps can support another line of business that you have within your organization. Next, OEDIT, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, is a great resource for our private sector. NACO, the National Association of Counties, they have a very good recovery clearinghouse that I found beneficial, trying to think through projects and proposals and what other states, counties and municipalities are doing from across the country. And then lastly, as you're thinking through how to frame race and equity within your application proposal, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity might be a good resource. And these are active links that you can access. So that's the end of the presentation. This is my contact information. This is my cell phone number. So I'll leave it up just for a moment so that you can jot down my contact info. Please feel free to text or call or send me an email. I want to be a resource to you and a thought partner, as do my colleagues, as you are thinking through potential applications. And we want to support you in this process. So with that, I will end our slide deck, and then Kylan will facilitate our Q&A. And then let me make sure I stop sharing. And then Kylan, can we also promote Eddie Valdez with Human Services to a panelist when you get a moment?
Yes, absolutely.
And so again, if you have a question, please feel free to drop that into the Q&A or raise your hand, and Kylan will take you off mute. And Eddie, would you mind just introducing yourself to the group as well, please? Okay, oh, there he is. You should be able to unmute yourself as well now, Eddie.
Sorry, I apologize. The internet's pretty unstable out here. What did you ask me to do, Christina?
Just introduce yourself, your name, your organization, your title, so participants know who you are. Oh, it looks like Eddie cut out, so I'll ask him to introduce himself via chat, and we'll turn it over to you, Kylan.
Right. So our first one is, can you co-apply with another nonprofit?
Yes, you can, and we encourage partnerships. And so, yes, if that is something that you're interested in doing, we are supportive of that.
Excellent. And will these slides be sent to attendees of this webinar?
They will be posted on the website. Kylan, we can also send the slide deck if you're able to access our registrant list for all of our webinars. We're happy to share that via email as well.
Excellent. Our next question, are the federal expenditure codes prioritized when it comes to the selection of funding programs?
Excellent question. No, they are not prioritized. You do not get extra points, but they are required. So you must meet at least one of the federal expenditure code to be eligible through the COVID-19 grant program. The two categories that we will be looking at closely are how your project or proposal supports the county goals, as well as the county identified COVID priorities, and there will be extra points awarded for the county COVID priorities.
Will there be reporting required related to Adams County address verification for all participants served?
We really want to be able to trust our partners in the way that you are providing services. So happy to connect with that individual offline, but we expect our partners to be honest with who they're serving and what portion of their budget, if they are serving more than one county, is dedicated to serving Adams County residents in particular. We have worked with an outside organization. I'll give you an example that provides vaccinations to a number of metro counties, they do have a self-attestation process that they incorporated where individuals will self-attest that in fact they are from Adams County. There is no verification or check. We really want to believe in the honesty and ethics of the organizations and individuals that are being served.
Next, we are a very small nonprofit mental health focused agency and may not have some things in place that may be required, like a formal audit. Would this be a barrier?
I would suggest you to reach out to me. We want to make sure that we are funding organizations that have the capacity and ability to accept and expend the funds as provided. And, happy to connect with you to better understand your organization's particular situation. But we want to make sure that we're, again, funding organizations that are fiscally solvent and financially sustainable, to be able to adequately and appropriately utilize and invest these dollars.
The last question we have so far is, can funds support a staff position if it addresses COVID mental health needs, for example?
Yes. So as a county, we are actually we're bringing on some additional staff. Human Services will give you an example. We saw about a 30% increase in eligibility applications due to COVID. So we were able to expand the number of staff that we have to be able to process those eligibility applications, to be able to give people access to the supports that they need today that were created because of COVID. So yes, you can create positions as long as you are able to tie them directly to the impact of COVID and how the position will work to help remedy that impact.
That's all we have so far. So.
Okay, you can also raise your hand if you would like to ask a question verbally, and Kylan will unmute you if you're more comfortable asking a question that way. Glenn, is there anything you wanted to share with the group or add?
I don't have anything just yet.
Looks like Melanie had, perfect. You should be able to unmute yourself now, Melanie.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just following on that last question around staffing or contract staffing for a position to support COVID work. If the balance of that work is happening in Adams County, but that person ends up doing a little bit of other COVID vaccine work because they are on staff or they're available, is that allowable?
Yes, as long as there's a proration of the actual cost of that person's time. So if somebody is spending approximately 80% of their time working with Adams County residents, and we would feel comfortable funding, if the project is approved, 80% of that staff member's time, understanding
Excellent.
that, we want to serve everybody who walks through those doors, but want to make sure that our dollars are supporting Adams County residents.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have one question submitted. Are there any funding limitations, and can we include indirect cost?
Excellent question. There are no, from funding limitations, there is no maximum grant amount. The other funding requirement is that you meet one of the federal expenditure codes. And then lastly, to directly answer the question, this is something that we have not discussed as a group, and this is the first time our indirect cost question has come up. So we will have that information out to you in a decision in early November. That's when the next time our group meets. I would just want to make sure that we're all in alignment internally. I know that with the CARES Act, there was some internal costs that were allowed, but I just want to make sure that we're good to go in that direction as well. We feel comfortable with that. So stay tuned and we'll get back to you.
Are expenses incurred from March 2020 through today eligible for reimbursement if they're related to COVID, or is it only for projects from December 2021 on?
Based on the federal rule, expenditures starting in March 2021 are eligible.
Are grants for 1 year only, or are multi-year grants possible? If yes, how many?
So we know today that the Board of County Commissioners has approved one grant cycle. And you have through 2024 to expend those dollars. So we are going to leave it up to each organization to decide if their project or proposal can be completed within 6 months, great. If you're going to take through December 2024, that is fine as well. But we don't know if the board will authorize an additional round of funding in the future. So be judicious with what you ask for, as well as the timing that you give yourself for implementation of your proposed project.
See no other questions.
Okay. These were great questions. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. We will post this recording on our website, as well as where the application will go live on November 1st. Feel free to reach out to me or any of my colleagues if you need anything between now and then, or as you're working through your applications. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.